Question 1. The review process indicates that a new enterprise client has contracted for cloud services, stipulating in their agreement that all their sensitive data must reside exclusively within the European Union. However, the current deployment architecture for this client's services utilizes shared infrastructure components that are physically located in the United States, even though data is encrypted in transit and at rest. The client has expressed concern that this configuration may violate their internal data governance policies and potentially contravene GDPR requirements regarding data transfers. What is the most appropriate course of action for the cloud provider's technical and legal teams? Option A. Immediately re-architect the client's service deployment to ensure all data storage and processing occurs on infrastructure physically located within the European Union, and inform the client of the completed remediation. Option B. Advise the client that since the data is encrypted, its physical location outside the EU is not a compliance concern, and proceed with the current deployment. Option C. Inform the client that their requirement for EU-only data residency cannot be met with the current service offering and suggest they explore alternative providers. Option D. Initiate a dialogue with the client to understand the precise nature of their data governance concerns and GDPR interpretation, while simultaneously assessing the technical feasibility and timeline for migrating their data and processing to EU-based infrastructure. Correct answer is A. Immediately re-architect the client's service deployment to ensure all data storage and processing occurs on infrastructure physically located within the European Union, and inform the client of the completed remediation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud provider environments where a customer's data residency requirements clash with the provider's operational model. Professional challenge lies in balancing customer contractual obligations, data privacy regulations, and the technical feasibility of fulfilling these requirements within the existing infrastructure. Misinterpreting or ignoring data residency laws can lead to severe legal and financial repercussions for both the cloud provider and the customer. The need for careful judgment stems from the potential for data breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the customer's specific data residency requirements as stipulated in their contract and relevant data protection laws. This necessitates engaging with the customer to clarify their needs, and then assessing the provider's infrastructure capabilities to determine if data can be logically or physically isolated within the specified geographic boundaries. If the current infrastructure cannot meet these requirements, the professional practice is to proactively communicate this limitation to the customer and explore alternative solutions, such as deploying dedicated infrastructure in the required region or recommending a different service offering that can comply. This approach upholds contractual integrity, demonstrates a commitment to customer data protection, and adheres to regulatory mandates by ensuring data is handled in accordance with applicable laws. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that since the data is encrypted, its physical location is irrelevant. This fails to recognize that data residency laws often focus on the physical location of data storage and processing, regardless of encryption status. Encryption is a security measure, not a substitute for compliance with data sovereignty regulations. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the deployment without verifying the infrastructure's capability to meet the residency requirements, hoping to address it later. This is a direct violation of due diligence and contractual obligations, exposing the provider to significant regulatory penalties and breach of contract claims. It also demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for customer trust. A third incorrect approach is to unilaterally decide that the customer's request is technically infeasible without consulting with them or exploring all possible solutions. This can lead to customer dissatisfaction, loss of business, and a perception of unresponsiveness, failing to uphold the principle of customer-centric service delivery. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a proactive and consultative approach. The decision-making process should begin with a clear understanding of contractual terms and regulatory obligations. When faced with a potential conflict, the first step is always to seek clarification from the customer. Subsequently, a comprehensive technical assessment of the provider's capabilities must be conducted. Transparency and open communication with the customer are paramount throughout this process. If compliance cannot be met with existing resources, the professional should present alternative solutions or clearly articulate the limitations, rather than making assumptions or delaying action. This methodical approach ensures adherence to legal frameworks, maintains customer trust, and safeguards the reputation of the cloud provider. Question 2. The analysis reveals that a VMware cloud provider is experiencing challenges in meeting customer demands for high availability and rapid data recovery following disruptive events, while also ensuring compliance with data residency and integrity mandates. The provider needs to implement a solution that offers both robust disaster recovery and reliable backup capabilities within their VMware Cloud Foundation environment. Which of the following approaches best addresses these requirements and aligns with professional best practices for VMware cloud providers? Option A. Utilize a third-party cloud storage service for raw VM disk images without any specific disaster recovery orchestration or backup software. Option B. Configure vSphere replication for basic VM replication to a secondary site without a defined recovery plan or integrated backup strategy. Option C. Implement a solution that combines VMware Site Recovery Manager for disaster recovery orchestration with a certified backup solution that supports granular recovery and long-term retention. Option D. Rely exclusively on frequent manual creation and management of VM snapshots for all critical workloads. The correct answer is C. Implement a solution that combines VMware Site Recovery Manager for disaster recovery orchestration with a certified backup solution that supports granular recovery and long-term retention. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common implementation challenge in VMware cloud provider environments, ensuring robust data protection and disaster recovery capabilities while adhering to strict service-level agreements, SLAs, and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in balancing the technical complexity of implementing and managing these solutions with the business imperative of minimizing downtime and data loss, all within a potentially regulated cloud provider context. Careful judgment is required to select and configure solutions that are not only effective, but also cost-efficient and compliant with relevant VMware Cloud Provider Program, VCPP, guidelines, and any underlying customer contractual obligations. The correct approach, which involves leveraging VMware's native replication capabilities integrated with a robust backup solution, represents best professional practice because it offers a comprehensive, integrated, and often more cost-effective solution. This approach directly aligns with the capabilities and recommendations often found within VMware's VCPP framework, promoting a unified management experience and ensuring compatibility. By utilizing native replication, the provider can offer granular recovery point objectives, RPO, and recovery time objectives, RTO, that meet stringent SLAs. Furthermore, integrating this with a certified backup solution ensures that data is not only replicated, but also securely stored and recoverable in various scenarios, including ransomware attacks or complete site failures, thereby meeting potential regulatory requirements for data integrity and availability. An incorrect approach that relies solely on manual snapshotting for disaster recovery is professionally unacceptable due to significant regulatory and ethical failures. Snapshots are not a substitute for proper backup and disaster recovery strategy. They are temporary points in time and can be easily corrupted or lost if the underlying storage fails, or if the snapshot itself becomes stale. Relying on them would violate the implicit or explicit contractual obligations to provide reliable data protection and could lead to severe data loss, failing to meet customer SLAs, and potentially breaching data protection regulations that mandate data integrity and availability. Another incorrect approach, which involves outsourcing disaster recovery to an unvetted third-party service without proper integration or validation, presents regulatory and ethical risks. This bypasses the provider's direct control over the recovery process, making it difficult to guarantee RTOs and RPOs. It also introduces compliance risks if the third-party provider does not meet the same security and data protection standards required by the customer or by relevant regulations. Ethically, the provider would be failing in its duty of care to the customer by entrusting critical data protection to an unknown entity. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a thorough assessment of customer requirements and SLAs, a deep understanding of available VMware and third-party technologies, and a clear grasp of the regulatory landscape applicable to cloud services. Professionals should prioritize solutions that offer proven reliability, integrate seamlessly with the existing VMware environment, and provide auditable proof of compliance. A risk-based approach, where potential failure points are identified and mitigated, is crucial. This involves rigorous testing of recovery procedures and regular review of the disaster recovery plan to ensure its continued effectiveness and compliance. Question 3. Stakeholder feedback indicates a customer has requested direct administrative access to the underlying VMware vSphere environment hosting their virtual machines, citing a need for rapid troubleshooting of a performance issue. As a VMware cloud provider specialist, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Initiate a formal change request process to assess the security implications and potential impact on the shared infrastructure before granting any access. Option B. Immediately grant the customer direct administrative access to the vSphere environment to expedite their troubleshooting efforts. Option C. Refuse the customer's request for direct access, stating that such access is not permitted under any circumstances. Option D. Provide the customer with a read-only view of the vSphere environment and suggest they escalate performance issues through the provider's support channels. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal change request process to assess the security implications and potential impact on the shared infrastructure before granting any access. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a customer's perceived immediate need and the provider's contractual obligations and security best practices. The customer's request, while seemingly straightforward, could expose the VMware cloud provider to significant security risks and potential noncompliance with its own service level agreements, SLAs, and the underlying VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, architecture. The provider must balance customer satisfaction with its responsibility to maintain a secure and stable multi-tenant environment, adhering to the principles of least privilege and robust change management. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and adherence to established change management procedures. This aligns with the principles of responsible cloud service provision, emphasizing security, stability, and compliance. By requiring a formal request, assessing the security implications, and ensuring the change is documented and approved, the provider upholds its contractual obligations, protects the integrity of its infrastructure, and demonstrates due diligence. This methodical process is crucial in a regulated environment where unauthorized access or configuration changes can lead to data breaches, service disruptions, and regulatory penalties. The provider's commitment to security best practices, as mandated by the VMware Cloud Provider Specialist Framework, necessitates this rigorous approach. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately grant the customer's request without further investigation. This bypasses essential security protocols and change management processes. It creates a precedent for unauthorized access and could lead to unintended consequences, such as misconfigurations that impact other tenants or compromise the overall security posture of the cloud environment. This failure to adhere to established security policies and procedures is a direct violation of best practices for cloud providers and could expose the provider to liability. Another incorrect approach is to refuse the request outright without offering an alternative or explaining the rationale. While security is paramount, a complete refusal without engagement can damage the customer relationship and may not be necessary if a secure, controlled method for fulfilling the request exists. This approach lacks customer service orientation and fails to explore potential solutions that could meet the customer's needs while maintaining security. A third incorrect approach is to implement the change without proper documentation or testing. This is a critical failure in change management. Lack of documentation makes it impossible to track the change, troubleshoot issues, or revert if necessary. Insufficient testing increases the risk of introducing errors that could destabilize the environment or impact other customers. This haphazard approach directly contravenes the principles of operational excellence and risk mitigation expected of a professional cloud provider. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves understanding the customer's request, evaluating its potential impact on security and service stability, consulting relevant policies and procedures, including contractual SLAs and internal security guidelines, and communicating transparently with the customer. When faced with a request that deviates from standard operating procedures, the professional should initiate a formal review process, which typically includes a security assessment, impact analysis, and a change control board approval. This ensures that all decisions are informed, documented, and aligned with the provider's commitment to security and service integrity. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent pattern of resource contention, impacting the performance of multiple customer virtual machines hosted on shared infrastructure. While the system can identify the specific customer workloads contributing to the contention through anonymized identifiers, it cannot definitively pinpoint the exact customer without accessing more granular, potentially sensitive, operational data that is not typically exposed to the provider's monitoring tools. The Provider Service Level Agreement, SLA, outlines general performance guarantees, but has vague clauses regarding the provider's right to access customer data for troubleshooting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the VMware cloud provider? Option A. Proceed with accessing the granular operational data to identify the problematic customer workloads, assuming that performance troubleshooting falls under the provider's inherent right to manage the infrastructure, and inform the customer only after the issue is resolved. Option B. Immediately escalate the issue to a higher technical tier within the provider organization to analyze the anonymized data further and attempt to resolve the performance contention without any direct customer interaction, citing the need to maintain service integrity. Option C. Ignore the performance anomaly as the SLA's clauses on data access are ambiguous and the risk of overstepping boundaries is too high, focusing instead on broader infrastructure optimizations that may indirectly alleviate the issue. Option D. Initiate a direct, documented request to the affected customers, explaining the observed performance issue and seeking their explicit consent to access specific operational data for troubleshooting, while also proposing potential solutions based on the anonymized data. The correct answer is D. Initiate a direct, documented request to the affected customers, explaining the observed performance issue and seeking their explicit consent to access specific operational data for troubleshooting, while also proposing potential solutions based on the anonymized data. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and service level agreements, SLAs, within a VMware cloud provider context. The challenge lies in balancing the provider's operational needs for performance monitoring with the customer's expectation of data confidentiality and the contractual obligations outlined in the SLA. The provider has a responsibility to maintain service quality, but this must be achieved without infringing upon customer data privacy or violating the terms of service. The correct approach involves transparent communication and adherence to contractual agreements. When the monitoring system reveals performance anomalies potentially linked to customer workloads, the provider must first consult the SLA to understand the agreed-upon monitoring and data access provisions. If the SLA permits anonymized or aggregated data analysis for performance troubleshooting, this is the preferred method. If specific customer data is required, the provider must seek explicit, documented consent from the customer before accessing or analyzing it, especially if it involves sensitive information. This upholds customer trust, ensures compliance with data protection regulations, such as GDPR or similar frameworks applicable to the exam's jurisdiction. Though not explicitly stated, the principles of data protection are universal in cloud services and maintains the integrity of the provider-customer relationship. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally access and analyze customer data without consent, even if it's for performance troubleshooting. This violates the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, potentially breaching contractual obligations and data privacy laws. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the performance anomaly, which could lead to service degradation and SLA breaches, demonstrating a failure in operational responsibility. Finally, attempting to infer customer-specific issues from aggregated data without direct confirmation or consent, while seemingly less intrusive, still carries the risk of misinterpretation and can erode customer confidence if discovered. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, contractual compliance, and customer consent. This involves 1. Reviewing the SLA for relevant clauses on monitoring and data access. 2. assessing the nature of the performance anomaly and the potential impact on service. 3. Determining if anonymized or aggregated data is sufficient for diagnosis. 4. If customer-specific data is necessary, initiating a clear and documented communication with the customer to obtain explicit consent, outlining the purpose and scope of data access. 5. Documenting all actions taken and communications with the customer. Question 5. During the evaluation of a VMware cloud provider's resource management strategy, which approach best optimizes resource allocation to meet diverse customer demands while ensuring SLA compliance and cost efficiency? Option A. Implement a tiered resource allocation model that guarantees resources for critical workloads and dynamically allocates remaining capacity to other workloads based on priority and availability. Option B. Aggressively deprovision resources during periods of low demand to minimize operational costs without a robust mechanism for rapid reprovisioning. Option C. Focus on manual resource adjustments for all provisioning and deprovisioning tasks to maintain granular control over every resource. Option D. Prioritize immediate provisioning of all requested resources to ensure maximum customer satisfaction, regardless of actual demand or potential for overallocation. The correct answer is A. Implement a tiered resource allocation model that guarantees resources for critical workloads and dynamically allocates remaining capacity to other workloads based on priority and availability. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for VMware cloud providers, optimizing resource utilization to meet fluctuating customer demands while adhering to service level agreements, SLAs, and cost management principles. Professional challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate resource availability for critical workloads against the long-term benefits of efficient resource allocation and the potential for over-provisioning, which can lead to increased operational costs and reduced profitability. Careful judgment is required to select a strategy that is both technically sound and commercially viable, ensuring customer satisfaction without compromising the provider's financial health. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively addresses potential resource contention by implementing a tiered resource allocation strategy. This strategy aligns with the principles of efficient cloud resource management, ensuring that critical customer workloads receive guaranteed resources, thereby meeting SLA commitments. Simultaneously, it allows for the dynamic allocation of remaining resources to less critical workloads, maximizing utilization and minimizing waste. This balanced approach demonstrates a commitment to both customer service and operational efficiency, which are key tenets for a successful VMware cloud provider. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate provisioning without considering future demand or resource pooling would lead to inefficient resource utilization and potentially higher costs. This could violate the provider's implicit ethical obligation to manage resources responsibly and could lead to contractual breaches if SLAs are not met due to resource starvation. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost reduction by aggressively deprovisioning resources during low demand periods without adequate safeguards for rapid reprovisioning could result in service disruptions. This failure to maintain service availability directly contravenes SLA obligations and erodes customer trust, representing a significant ethical and professional failing. A third incorrect approach that relies on manual intervention for all resource adjustments is inherently inefficient and prone to human error. This lack of automation hinders scalability and responsiveness, making it difficult to meet dynamic demands and maintain optimal resource utilization, which is a core expectation of a cloud service provider. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough assessment of current and projected resource demands, a clear understanding of SLA requirements for different customer tiers, and an evaluation of available VMware cloud provider technologies for resource management and automation. Professionals should prioritize strategies that offer a balance between guaranteed performance, cost-effectiveness, and operational agility, always keeping customer satisfaction and regulatory compliance at the forefront of their decision-making. Question 6. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in VM latency for several customer workloads hosted on a shared vSphere cluster. While overall cluster utilization appears within acceptable limits, individual VM performance is suffering. What is the most appropriate initial step to diagnose and address this issue? Option A. Immediately inform the affected customers that performance degradation is occurring due to shared resource utilization and that resolution may take time. Option B. Initiate a scaling operation to add more XC hosts to the cluster to increase overall capacity. Option C. Proactively over-provision additional CPU and memory resources to the affected VMs to alleviate potential resource starvation. Option D. Analyze vSphere performance metrics at the VM and host levels to identify specific resource contention, CPU ready time, memory ballooning, storage I/O latency, network packet loss, and correlate these with the affected VMs. The correct answer is D. Analyze vSphere performance metrics at the VM and host levels to identify specific resource contention, CPU ready time, memory ballooning, storage I/O latency, network packet loss, and correlate these with the affected VMs. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud provider environments, balancing performance optimization with adherence to service level agreements, SLAs, and customer expectations, particularly when resource contention arises. The professional challenge lies in diagnosing the root cause of performance degradation without immediately resorting to disruptive or costly measures, while ensuring compliance with contractual obligations. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation of the underlying infrastructure and resource allocation. This aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing data-driven decision-making and minimizing impact on customer services. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of responsible resource management and proactive problem-solving expected of a VMware cloud provider specialist. By analyzing vSphere performance metrics and identifying specific resource bottlenecks, CPU, memory, storage I/O, network, the specialist can pinpoint the exact cause of the degradation. This allows for targeted remediation, such as adjusting resource pools, optimizing VM configurations, or investigating potential network issues, all of which are within the scope of managing a VMware cloud environment. This methodical approach ensures that any actions taken are justified, effective, and compliant with the provider's operational standards and customer SLAs. An incorrect approach would be to immediately over-provision resources without a clear diagnosis. This is professionally unacceptable because it is a costly and inefficient solution that masks the underlying problem. It fails to address the root cause of the performance issue and could lead to recurring problems. Ethically, it represents a failure to provide a cost-effective service and could be seen as a misallocation of resources, potentially impacting profitability and customer trust. Another incorrect approach would be to simply inform the affected customer that performance is degraded without providing a clear explanation or proposed solution. This is professionally deficient, as it demonstrates a lack of proactive problem-solving and customer communication. It fails to meet the expectation of a managed service provider to actively diagnose and resolve issues. Ethically, it erodes customer confidence and can lead to dissatisfaction and potential contract disputes. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately scale out the underlying infrastructure by adding more hosts without understanding the specific bottleneck. While scaling can be a solution, doing so without proper diagnosis is inefficient and potentially unnecessary. It incurs significant capital and operational expenditure without guaranteeing a resolution if the bottleneck is not related to host capacity. This represents a failure in cost management and resource optimization, which are critical aspects of a cloud provider's operations. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the reported issue and its potential impact. 2. Initiating a thorough diagnostic process using available monitoring and logging tools. 3. Correlating performance metrics with resource utilization at various layers of the infrastructure, VM, host, storage, network. 4. Identifying the specific bottleneck S causing the degradation. 5. Developing a targeted remediation plan based on the diagnosis. 6. Communicating the findings and proposed actions to relevant stakeholders, including customers if appropriate. 7. Implementing the remediation and verifying its effectiveness. Question 7. Process analysis reveals a customer operating within a highly regulated industry has engaged your VMware cloud provider services and has stated a requirement to adhere to specific data residency and access control mandates. The customer has provided documentation outlining these mandates, but has not detailed their internal implementation strategies. What is the most appropriate next step for the VMware cloud provider specialist to ensure both parties understand their respective compliance obligations? Option A. Inform the customer that compliance is entirely their responsibility and that the provider cannot offer any guidance or confirmation regarding how their services align with specific regulatory mandates, as this falls outside the provider's scope. Option B. Review the customer's provided documentation. Confirm the provider's infrastructure and services meet the stated data residency and access control requirements, and then clearly communicate to the customer which aspects of these mandates are covered by the provider's services and which remain the customer's responsibility to implement and manage. Option C. Proactively implement additional security controls within the customer's environment to enforce stricter access controls and data residency, exceeding the stated requirements, without explicit customer request or confirmation. Option D. Assume that by providing a compliant cloud infrastructure, the provider has fulfilled all compliance obligations related to the customer's data and access controls, and inform the customer that their compliance is solely their internal matter. The correct answer is B. Review the customer's provided documentation. Confirm the provider's infrastructure and services meet the stated data residency and access control requirements, and then clearly communicate to the customer which aspects of these mandates are covered by the provider's services and which remain the customer's responsibility to implement and manage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud provider environments where a customer's compliance requirements intersect with the provider's operational capabilities and shared responsibility model. The professional challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying the VMware cloud provider specialist's responsibilities within the context of the customer's specific regulatory obligations, without overstepping boundaries or making assumptions about the customer's internal controls. The need for precise understanding of the shared responsibility model is paramount, as misinterpretations can lead to compliance gaps or unnecessary provider interventions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the customer's stated compliance requirements and a clear articulation of the provider's responsibilities as defined by the shared responsibility model. This means identifying precisely which aspects of the compliance framework are managed by the provider, e.g., infrastructure security, physical security of data centers, and which remain the customer's responsibility, e.g., application-level security, data classification, user access management. The provider must then confirm that their services and configurations align with the customer's needs and that the customer understands their own obligations. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring transparency, adherence to contractual agreements, and a clear understanding of roles, thereby preventing potential compliance failures and fostering a collaborative security posture. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the provider offers a compliant infrastructure, the customer's entire compliance burden is met. This fails to acknowledge the customer's responsibility for their data, applications, and user access, which are critical components of most regulatory frameworks. This oversight represents a significant regulatory failure, as it can lead to the customer being non-compliant despite using a compliant provider. Another incorrect approach is to proactively implement security controls that the customer has not explicitly requested or that fall outside the provider's defined service scope, without prior consultation. While seemingly helpful, this can lead to misconfigurations, unintended operational impacts, and potential conflicts with the customer's existing security policies or future plans. Ethically, it represents an overreach of the provider's authority and a potential violation of the service agreement. A third incorrect approach is to simply state that compliance is the customer's responsibility without providing any guidance or confirmation of the provider's own compliant offerings. This abdicates the provider's role in facilitating compliance within their service domain and can leave the customer with insufficient information to make informed decisions, potentially leading to a compliance gap. This is a failure in professional duty to assist and inform within the scope of services offered. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a consultative and evidence-based approach. This involves 1. Understanding the customer's stated compliance needs and the relevant regulatory framework. 2. Clearly defining the boundaries of the shared responsibility model as it applies to the services being provided. 3. documenting the provider's responsibilities and confirming the customer's understanding of their own. 4. Proactively communicating any limitations or areas where the customer must implement their own controls. 5. Seeking clarification and engaging in open dialogue to ensure mutual understanding and alignment on compliance objectives. Question 8. Regulatory review indicates that a VMware cloud provider is developing a new multi-tenant service offering that will process sensitive customer data. To ensure compliance with data protection regulations and mitigate potential risks, what is the most appropriate initial step in the impact assessment process for this new service? Option A. Perform a post-deployment audit of the service to verify its compliance with existing data protection policies and identify any deviations. Option B. Develop a detailed security policy for the new service, focusing on access controls and encryption mechanisms before any other impact assessment activities. Option C. Initiate early and collaborative engagement with legal and compliance teams to identify all applicable regulatory requirements and potential data privacy concerns related to the service's design and intended use. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the service's technical architecture and operational workflows to identify potential data processing activities and storage locations. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the service's technical architecture and operational workflows to identify potential data processing activities and storage locations. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in a cloud provider environment where a new service offering is being developed. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the impact assessment for this new service adequately addresses potential regulatory compliance issues without introducing new risks or violating existing data protection and privacy mandates. The pressure to innovate and deploy quickly can often lead to overlooking critical compliance steps, making a thorough and proactive impact assessment paramount. The challenge is to balance business objectives with the stringent requirements of data governance and regulatory adherence, particularly concerning customer data processed within the VMware cloud. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with legal and compliance teams early in the service development lifecycle. This ensures that potential regulatory implications, such as data residency, data sovereignty, and specific privacy controls mandated by relevant frameworks e.g. GDPR if applicable to the customer base, or specific U.S. federal/state regulations depending on the target market, are identified and addressed before the service is finalized. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, which are fundamental to many regulatory frameworks governing cloud services. By integrating compliance considerations from the outset, the provider can build a service that is inherently compliant, reducing the risk of costly remediation or penalties later. This proactive engagement also ensures that the impact assessment is comprehensive, covering not just technical feasibility, but also legal and ethical considerations related to data handling. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to defer the regulatory impact assessment until after the service has been developed and is ready for deployment. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of proactive compliance and privacy by design, potentially leading to the deployment of a service that is non-compliant with data protection laws. This can result in severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. It also creates a reactive and costly remediation process. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the technical team's understanding of the new service's functionality without involving legal or compliance experts. This is an ethical failure, as it demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations. Technical teams may not be aware of the nuances of data privacy laws or specific industry regulations, leading to an incomplete or inaccurate impact assessment. This can result in unintentional breaches of compliance, even with good intentions. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial impact assessment that only considers the most obvious technical requirements and overlooks potential data privacy or security implications. This is a regulatory failure because it fails to meet the due diligence expected under most data protection frameworks. A superficial assessment is insufficient to identify and mitigate risks associated with customer data, which is the core concern for regulators and customers alike. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud provider roles must adopt a risk-based and proactive approach to impact assessments. This involves establishing clear internal processes that mandate early and continuous engagement with legal, compliance, and security teams throughout the service development lifecycle. When developing new services, a structured impact assessment framework should be employed, ensuring that all potential regulatory touchpoints are identified. This framework should include specific checkpoints for data privacy, data residency, data sovereignty, and adherence to relevant industry standards and legal mandates. Professionals should prioritize building a culture where compliance is seen as an integral part of service design, not an afterthought. This requires ongoing training and awareness programs for all teams involved in service development and operations. Question 9. Cost-benefit analysis shows that adopting a new, unproven data deduplication technology for VMware cloud provider environments could significantly reduce storage costs. However, the assessment has not yet fully explored the potential impact on data integrity during the deduplication process and the technology's compatibility with existing disaster recovery and backup solutions. Which of the following represents the most prudent next step for the VMware cloud provider? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that thoroughly evaluates the technology's effects on data integrity, backup, disaster recovery, and overall service resilience, in addition to the cost benefits, before making a final decision. Option B. Proceed with the adoption of the new technology, prioritizing the immediate cost savings and addressing any data integrity or recovery issues that may arise post-implementation. Option C. Defer the adoption of the new technology indefinitely, as the potential risks to data integrity and recovery outweigh the projected cost savings. Option D. Implement the new technology on a small, non-critical subset of data to gauge its performance and stability before a full rollout, assuming that any issues will be contained. Correct answer is B. Proceed with the adoption of the new technology, prioritizing the immediate cost savings and addressing any data integrity or recovery issues that may arise post-implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the perceived immediate benefits of a new technology with its potential long-term, less quantifiable impacts on the organization's operational resilience and compliance posture. The pressure to innovate and adopt new solutions can sometimes overshadow a thorough assessment of risks, particularly those related to data integrity, security, and the ability to meet regulatory obligations under the VMware Cloud Provider Specialist Framework. Careful judgment is required to ensure that technological advancements do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or compliance gaps. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive impact assessment that includes not only the technical and financial aspects, but also the operational, security, and regulatory implications. This aligns with the principles of responsible technology adoption and risk management expected of VMware cloud providers. By systematically evaluating potential disruptions, data integrity risks, and the alignment with existing compliance frameworks, such as those relevant to data protection and service availability, the organization can make an informed decision that safeguards its operations and client trust. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining the integrity of services offered and adhering to the spirit and letter of relevant regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings, without a commensurate evaluation of potential data integrity issues, is professionally unacceptable. This failure represents a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It demonstrates a disregard for the fundamental responsibility to protect client data, a core tenet of cloud provider services. Such an oversight could lead to data corruption, loss, or unauthorized access, resulting in severe regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of client confidence. Another incorrect approach that overlooks the potential impact on service availability and disaster recovery capabilities is equally problematic. Cloud providers are expected to maintain high levels of uptime and robust recovery mechanisms. Neglecting this aspect in an impact assessment can lead to service disruptions, failure to meet service-level agreements (SLAs), and non-compliance with regulations mandating business continuity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should mandate the identification of all potential impacts, both positive and negative, across technical, operational, financial, security, and regulatory domains. Stakeholders from various departments, including IT operations, security, legal, and compliance, should be involved in the assessment process. The organization should establish clear criteria for evaluating the severity and likelihood of identified risks and develop mitigation strategies for those that exceed acceptable thresholds. Ultimately, decisions should be guided by a commitment to operational excellence, data security, and regulatory compliance, ensuring that any new technology adoption serves to enhance, rather than compromise, these critical areas. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that a new client, operating within a highly regulated financial services sector in the United Kingdom, requires a VMware cloud provider solution for their sensitive customer transaction data. The client has expressed a strong preference for the most cost-effective and performant global deployment options available through the provider's services. However, the client has not explicitly detailed their specific data residency obligations under UK financial regulations. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while adhering to professional and regulatory best practices? Option A. Immediately halt the deployment process and initiate a detailed consultation with the client to identify and document all specific UK regulatory requirements pertaining to data residency for financial transaction data before proposing any solution architecture. Option B. Recommend a hybrid cloud solution that keeps the most sensitive data on premises within the UK while leveraging global cloud resources for less sensitive workloads without a formal regulatory assessment. Option C. Advise the client that data residency is solely their responsibility to manage and that the provider offers global services that can be utilized as the client deems appropriate. Option D. Proceed with deploying the solution using the most cost-effective and performant global regions, assuming that standard VMware cloud provider services meet general data protection requirements, and inform the client of the chosen locations. The correct answer is D. Proceed with deploying the solution using the most cost-effective and performant global regions, assuming that standard VMware cloud provider services meet general data protection requirements, and inform the client of the chosen locations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data residency and compliance within the context of VMware cloud provider services. The core difficulty lies in balancing the client's desire for cost optimization and performance with the stringent regulatory requirements governing the storage and processing of sensitive customer data. A cloud provider specialist must navigate these competing demands while ensuring adherence to the specific legal and regulatory framework applicable to the client's operational jurisdiction. The correct approach prioritizes understanding and adhering to the client's regulatory obligations regarding data residency. This involves a thorough assessment of the client's industry, the type of data being handled, and the specific laws and regulations that dictate where that data can be stored and processed. By engaging in a detailed consultation to identify these requirements, and then architecting a solution that meets them, the provider demonstrates a commitment to compliance and client trust. This aligns with best professional practices by placing regulatory adherence and client data protection at the forefront, preventing potential legal repercussions, reputational damage, and loss of client confidence. An incorrect approach that overlooks or downplays data residency requirements is professionally unacceptable. For instance, recommending a solution based solely on cost or performance without verifying compliance with data sovereignty laws constitutes a significant regulatory failure. This could lead to breaches of data protection regulations, resulting in substantial fines, legal action, and severe damage to the provider's reputation. Another incorrect approach might involve assuming that standard VMware cloud provider offerings inherently satisfy all data residency needs, without explicit verification for the client's specific jurisdiction. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to understand the nuances of regulatory compliance, which can expose both the provider and the client to significant risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify client requirements. Clearly understand the client's business objectives, technical needs, and crucially, their regulatory and compliance obligations. 2. Regulatory assessment. Conduct a thorough review of all applicable laws, regulations, and industry standards pertaining to data storage, processing, and residency for the client's specific jurisdiction and industry. 3. Solution design with compliance in mind. Architect solutions that not only meet performance and cost objectives, but are fundamentally designed to comply with identified regulatory mandates. This may involve selecting specific VMware cloud provider services, data center locations, and data management policies. 4. Client consultation and validation. Engage in open and transparent communication with the client, explaining the proposed solution's compliance aspects and obtaining their confirmation that it meets their understanding of regulatory requirements. 5. Ongoing monitoring and auditing. Implement mechanisms for continuous monitoring of compliance and conduct regular audits to ensure ongoing adherence to regulations. Question 11. Implementation of automated resource scaling for customer environments, focusing on optimizing resource utilization and reducing manual intervention, requires a strategic approach to ensure compliance with VMware Cloud Provider Program, VCPP, guidelines and maintain service integrity. Which of the following strategies best balances efficiency with regulatory adherence and operational stability? Option A. Phased automation of scaling rules with rigorous testing and validation of each automated component before full deployment, coupled with continuous monitoring and auditing of the automated scaling behavior. Option B. Automation of scaling logic based on historical usage patterns without implementing any real-time validation mechanisms, assuming that historical data accurately predicts future needs. Option C. Prioritizing the automation of the most complex scaling scenarios first to demonstrate advanced capabilities, deferring testing and validation until after the system is live and operational. Option D. Immediate deployment of a comprehensive, vendor-agnostic automation solution across all customer environments to maximize immediate cost savings and reduce operational overhead. Correct answer is A. Phased automation of scaling rules with rigorous testing and validation of each automated component before full deployment, coupled with continuous monitoring and auditing of the automated scaling behavior. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud provider environments where the drive for efficiency and cost reduction can sometimes conflict with the need for robust, auditable processes. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to streamline operations with the imperative to maintain compliance and ensure the integrity of service delivery. Specifically, the pressure to reduce manual intervention without a corresponding increase in automated validation or oversight creates a risk of process drift and potential noncompliance with VMware Cloud Provider Program, VCPP, guidelines or underlying service level agreements, SLAs. The professional must navigate the tension between operational agility and the strict requirements of a regulated service offering. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of automation, coupled with rigorous testing and validation at each stage. This aligns with best practices for process optimization in regulated environments. By automating specific, well-defined tasks and then thoroughly testing the automated process before broader deployment, the provider ensures that efficiency gains do not compromise accuracy or compliance. This methodical approach allows for early detection of issues and minimizes the risk of introducing errors or non-compliance into the production environment. It also facilitates the creation of auditable logs and records, which are crucial for demonstrating adherence to VCPP requirements and any other relevant industry standards or contractual obligations. This demonstrates a commitment to both operational excellence and regulatory adherence, a cornerstone of professional conduct in the VCPP. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing automation without comprehensive testing and validation introduces significant regulatory and ethical risks. A failure to validate automated processes can lead to unintended consequences, such as incorrect resource provisioning, misconfigurations, or data inconsistencies, all of which could violate VCPP terms, SLAs, or data protection regulations. This approach prioritizes speed over accuracy and compliance, which is professionally unacceptable. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on vendor-provided automation tools without understanding their underlying logic or impact on the specific service delivery model. While vendor tools are valuable, they must be integrated and configured in a manner that is consistent with the provider's operational policies and compliance obligations. Blindly adopting tools without due diligence can lead to a situation where the provider is out of compliance without realizing it, creating a significant ethical and regulatory liability. Finally, attempting to automate complex, multi-stage processes in a single, large deployment without intermediate validation is highly risky. Such an approach increases the likelihood of cascading failures and makes troubleshooting exceptionally difficult. This lack of granular control and validation demonstrates a disregard for the potential impact on service integrity and customer trust, which are fundamental ethical considerations for any cloud service provider. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a risk-based approach to process optimization. This involves identifying critical processes, assessing the potential impact of automation on compliance and service quality, and prioritizing automation efforts accordingly. A robust change management process, including thorough testing, validation, and rollback plans, is essential. Furthermore, continuous monitoring and auditing of automated processes are necessary to ensure ongoing compliance and identify any deviations. Professionals should always prioritize adherence to the VCPP framework and any applicable legal or contractual obligations, ensuring that efficiency gains are achieved responsibly and ethically. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that a proposed update to the VMware Cloud Foundation infrastructure is technically feasible and expected to improve overall performance. However, the update has not undergone a formal impact assessment concerning its potential effects on existing customer service level agreements, SLAs, or any relevant data residency regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement the update and then perform an impact assessment to address any issues that arise post-implementation. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates the technical, operational, contractual SLAs, and regulatory compliance implications before proceeding with the update. Option C. Defer the update until a later date when resources are available to perform a superficial review of potential impacts. Option D. Proceed with the update immediately, as the performance benefits are significant and the technical feasibility is confirmed. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the update immediately, as the performance benefits are significant and the technical feasibility is confirmed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud provider environments where the impact of a proposed change on existing services and customer SLAs needs to be thoroughly assessed. The challenge lies in balancing the need for innovation and service improvement with the contractual obligations and regulatory compliance requirements that govern the provision of cloud services. A failure to conduct a proper impact assessment can lead to service disruptions, breaches of contract, regulatory penalties, and significant reputational damage. The complexity is amplified by the interconnected nature of cloud infrastructure and the diverse range of services offered to various customer segments, each with potentially different compliance and performance expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive impact assessment that considers all relevant factors. This includes evaluating the technical implications of the change on VMware Cloud Foundation components, underlying infrastructure, and integrated services. Crucially, it necessitates an analysis of the potential impact on existing service-level agreements, SLAs, with customers, ensuring that the proposed change does not lead to any breaches. Furthermore, a thorough assessment must consider any regulatory or compliance implications, such as data residency, security standards, or industry-specific regulations that might be affected. This proactive and holistic evaluation allows for informed decision-making, risk mitigation, and the development of appropriate remediation plans before the change is implemented, thereby upholding professional standards and contractual obligations. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the change without a formal impact assessment is a direct violation of good governance and risk management principles. It exposes the provider to significant operational and financial risks, including service outages and SLA breaches, which can lead to customer dissatisfaction and legal repercussions. This approach disregards the need for due diligence and professional responsibility in managing a complex cloud environment. Proceeding with the change based solely on the perceived technical feasibility, without considering customer SLAs or regulatory compliance, demonstrates a failure to understand the broader responsibilities of a cloud provider. This narrow focus ignores the critical business and legal dimensions of service delivery, leading to potential contractual breaches and regulatory noncompliance. Deferring the impact assessment until after the change has been implemented is a reactive and irresponsible strategy. It means that any negative consequences, such as service degradation or compliance issues, will already have occurred, making remediation more difficult and costly. This approach fails to meet the professional obligation to anticipate and mitigate risks proactively. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud provider roles must adopt a risk-based approach to change management. This involves establishing clear processes for evaluating proposed changes with a mandatory impact assessment phase. This assessment should encompass technical, operational, contractual SLAs, and regulatory/compliance dimensions. When faced with a change, the decision-making process should prioritize understanding potential impacts on service availability, performance, security, and customer commitments. If the assessment reveals significant risks, the process should dictate either modifying the change, implementing mitigation strategies, or postponing/rejecting the change until risks can be adequately managed. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory requirements. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new multi-tenant cloud service offering could significantly increase revenue, but its implementation involves processing sensitive customer data across multiple regions. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with relevant data protection regulations and minimizes potential risks? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that maps data flows against specific regulatory requirements and involves legal and compliance teams before deployment. Option B. Implement the service with a focus on general security best practices, assuming that specific regulatory nuances will be addressed if they arise. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment to capture market share, deferring a detailed impact assessment until after the service has been established and is generating revenue. Option D. Proceed with the service deployment based on the initial cost-benefit analysis, relying on post-deployment monitoring to identify and address any compliance issues. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that maps data flows against specific regulatory requirements and involves legal and compliance teams before deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for VMware cloud providers, balancing the immediate financial benefits of a new service offering against the potential long-term risks and compliance implications. The core difficulty lies in accurately assessing the impact of a new technology on existing security postures and regulatory adherence without concrete, pre-existing data. Professionals must exercise sound judgment to avoid both underestimating risks and over-engineering solutions that stifle innovation and profitability. The pressure to deliver new services quickly can often lead to shortcuts in impact assessment, creating a professional challenge that requires a structured and compliant approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and comprehensive impact assessment that integrates regulatory requirements from the outset. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental in regulated cloud environments. By engaging relevant stakeholders, including legal, compliance, and security teams, and by mapping the new service's data flows and processing activities against specific regulatory obligations, e.g., data privacy, data residency, industry-specific mandates, the provider ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated before deployment. This approach demonstrates due diligence, a key ethical and professional obligation, and minimizes the likelihood of future noncompliance, which can result in significant financial penalties and reputational damage. It also ensures that the cost-benefit analysis is informed by a realistic understanding of the total cost of ownership, including compliance and security overhead. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the service deployment based solely on the initial cost-benefit analysis without a thorough impact assessment. This is professionally unacceptable because it disregards potential regulatory violations and security vulnerabilities. It represents a failure of due diligence and an abdication of responsibility to protect customer data and maintain compliance. Such an approach could lead to breaches, data loss, and significant legal repercussions, directly contravening the ethical duty to operate responsibly and within legal frameworks. Another incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial impact assessment that only considers obvious security risks, neglecting the nuances of specific regulatory frameworks applicable to the data being processed. This is flawed because regulatory compliance often extends beyond basic security measures to include aspects like data governance, audit trails, and specific consent mechanisms. Failing to address these can lead to non-compliance, even if the service is technically secure. This approach demonstrates a lack of professional rigor and an incomplete understanding of the provider's obligations. A third incorrect approach might be to defer the full impact assessment until after the service is launched, relying on post-deployment monitoring to catch issues. While monitoring is important, it is a reactive measure. The ethical and professional standard requires a proactive identification and mitigation of risks. Waiting for issues to arise is a failure to anticipate and prevent harm, which is a core tenet of professional responsibility in the cloud provider space. This approach can lead to significant disruption and remediation efforts after a potential incident has already occurred. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes a comprehensive impact assessment. This process should involve 1. Clearly defining the scope of the new service and the types of data it will handle. 2. Identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks and compliance obligations. 3. Engaging cross-functional teams, legal, compliance, security, operations, to analyze potential impacts on security, privacy, and regulatory adherence. 4. Documenting all identified risks and proposed mitigation strategies. 5. Integrating the findings of the impact assessment into the final cost-benefit analysis and project plan. This systematic approach ensures that business objectives are pursued responsibly and ethically, with a clear understanding of the associated risks and compliance requirements. Question 14. Governance review demonstrates that a new VMware-based service offering is being rapidly deployed across multiple customer tenants without a formal, documented assessment of its data residency implications against the specific regulatory frameworks governing each tenant's operations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional responsibilities and regulatory compliance for a VMware cloud provider specialist? Option A. Deploy the service as planned, but instruct the sales and support teams to inform customers that data residency is their sole responsibility and that the provider offers no guarantees in this regard. Option B. Proceed with the deployment, assuming that standard VMware configurations inherently meet all data residency requirements, and address any specific issues if they are raised by customers or regulators. Option C. Delegate the entire responsibility for data residency assessment to each individual customer, providing them with a generic checklist to complete before they can utilize the new service. Option D. Immediately halt the deployment of the new service until a comprehensive, tenant-specific data residency assessment is completed and documented, ensuring alignment with all applicable laws and customer contractual obligations. Correct answer is B. Proceed with the deployment, assuming that standard VMware configurations inherently meet all data residency requirements, and address any specific issues if they are raised by customers or regulators. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud provider environments where the rapid evolution of technology and service offerings can outpace formal governance and compliance documentation. The challenge lies in ensuring that the operational practices, particularly those related to data residency and sovereignty, align with the VMware cloud provider specialist's responsibilities and the underlying regulatory framework. The professional must balance the need for agility in service delivery with the imperative of strict adherence to data protection laws, which can have significant legal and reputational consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and documented process of assessing new service deployments against existing data residency policies and relevant regulations. This ensures that any deviation or new requirement is identified and addressed before the service goes live. For a VMware cloud provider specialist, this means understanding the specific data sovereignty requirements applicable to the customer's data and the provider's infrastructure, and then verifying that the chosen VMware technologies and configurations meet these requirements. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, which are fundamental to regulatory compliance and ethical data handling. It demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and risk mitigation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that standard VMware deployment templates inherently satisfy all data residency requirements. This fails to acknowledge that data residency is often context-specific, depending on the customer's industry, geographic location, and the type of data being processed. Relying on assumptions without verification is a direct violation of due diligence and can lead to noncompliance with data protection laws, such as those requiring data to remain within specific geographic boundaries. Another incorrect approach is to defer the data residency assessment to the customer, without providing clear guidance or a framework for them to do so. While customer input is crucial, the cloud provider has a professional and often regulatory obligation to ensure its infrastructure and services are compliant. Shifting this responsibility entirely can be seen as an abdication of duty, and may still result in the provider being held accountable for noncompliance if their services facilitate a breach of data residency laws. A third incorrect approach is to implement the new service without any specific data residency checks, intending to address compliance issues only if they arise. This reactive stance is highly risky and unprofessional. It ignores the proactive nature of regulatory compliance and the potential for severe penalties, including fines and reputational damage, that can occur even before a problem is identified. It demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the principles of responsible data management. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should adopt a systematic and documented approach to service deployment. This involves establishing clear policies and procedures for assessing new services against regulatory requirements, including data residency. A risk-based methodology should be employed, prioritizing assessments for services handling sensitive data or operating in highly regulated environments. Collaboration with legal and compliance teams is essential. When in doubt, seeking clarification and obtaining formal sign-off before deployment is a critical step in professional decision-making. Question 15. Investigation of a VMware cloud provider's operational efficiency reveals significant underutilization of compute and storage resources across multiple customer tenants. The provider is under pressure to reduce operational costs. Which of the following approaches best balances cost reduction with maintaining service quality and contractual obligations? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of resource utilization patterns and performance metrics for each tenant. Identify opportunities for resource right-sizing, consolidation, and automation of routine tasks, and implement changes incrementally with robust monitoring and rollback capabilities. Option B. Immediately reduce the allocated resources for all tenants exhibiting above-average utilization to bring them in line with the provider's average resource consumption. Option C. Decommission non-critical management services and reduce the frequency of performance monitoring checks to cut down on operational overhead. Option D. Implement a blanket policy of increasing resource reservation percentages for all virtual machines to ensure guaranteed performance, regardless of actual workload demand. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of resource utilization patterns and performance metrics for each tenant. Identify opportunities for resource right-sizing, consolidation, and automation of routine tasks, and implement changes incrementally with robust monitoring and rollback capabilities. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud provider environments: optimizing resource utilization and cost efficiency without compromising service levels or violating contractual obligations. The pressure to reduce operational expenditure is constant, but any optimization effort must be carefully planned and executed to avoid unintended consequences such as performance degradation, service interruption, or non-compliance with service-level agreements, SLAs, and customer contracts. The complexity arises from the interconnectedness of VMware cloud provider services, the dynamic nature of customer workloads, and the need to balance immediate cost savings with long-term operational stability and customer satisfaction. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven methodology for identifying and implementing process optimizations. This begins with a thorough assessment of current resource utilization patterns, performance metrics, and cost drivers. Leveraging VMware's built-in tools and best practices for capacity planning and performance tuning is crucial. Implementing changes incrementally, with robust monitoring and rollback plans, ensures that any negative impacts are quickly identified and mitigated. This aligns with the principles of responsible cloud resource management, emphasizing efficiency, reliability, and adherence to contractual commitments. For a VMware cloud provider specialist, this means understanding the specific capabilities of VMware Cloud Director, vSphere, and related management tools to identify opportunities for resource pooling, right-sizing, and automation that directly benefit both the provider and its customers, all while maintaining compliance with the underlying service agreements. Incorrect approach is analysis, implementing broad, unverified cost-cutting measures without a detailed understanding of their impact on customer workloads is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, indiscriminately reducing resource allocations or disabling non-critical services could lead to SLA breaches, customer dissatisfaction, and potential contractual disputes. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the provider's commitment to delivering reliable services. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings over performance monitoring. This could result in subtle performance degradations that go unnoticed until they cause significant customer impact, leading to reputational damage and potential financial penalties. Furthermore, failing to document and communicate optimization efforts to relevant stakeholders, including customers where applicable, can lead to misunderstandings and erode trust, which is a critical component of the cloud provider-customer relationship. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a proactive and analytical approach to process optimization. This involves establishing clear objectives, gathering comprehensive data, and employing a phased implementation strategy. Before making any changes, a thorough risk assessment should be conducted, considering potential impacts on performance, availability, and compliance. Continuous monitoring and performance benchmarking are essential to validate the effectiveness of optimizations and to detect any adverse effects. Communication and transparency with customers regarding significant changes that might affect their services are also paramount. This structured decision-making process ensures that optimizations are beneficial, sustainable, and aligned with both business goals and regulatory requirements. Question 16. What factors determine the most appropriate strategy for migrating a customer's virtualized workloads to a VMware Cloud Provider Program, VCPP, environment, considering the customer's existing on-premises infrastructure's specific performance characteristics and the provider's service offerings? Option A. Applying generic cloud migration best practices without specific validation against the provider's VCPP framework or the customer's unique environment. Option B. Prioritizing the customer's stated migration timeline and budget constraints above all other technical and contractual considerations. Option C. A comprehensive assessment of the customer's current on-premises performance metrics, compatibility with the provider's VCPP infrastructure, and alignment with the provider's contractual SLAs and VMware's VCPP guidelines. Option D. Relying on past successful migration experiences with similar customers, assuming the current scenario will present no unique challenges. The correct answer is C. A comprehensive assessment of the customer's current on-premises performance metrics, compatibility with the provider's VCPP infrastructure, and alignment with the provider's contractual SLAs and VMware's VCPP guidelines. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a cloud provider specialist to balance the technical requirements of a customer's migration with the provider's own operational constraints and contractual obligations, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing VMware Cloud Provider Specialists. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant VMware Cloud Provider Program, VCPP, guidelines and any associated service level agreements, SLAs, to a situation where a customer's existing on-premises environment has specific, potentially non-standard performance characteristics. The specialist must avoid making assumptions about compatibility or performance without proper due diligence, as this could lead to service degradation, contractual breaches, or regulatory noncompliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, data-driven assessment of the customer's environment against the provider's capabilities and contractual commitments. This involves leveraging VMware's own best practices for cloud migration, understanding the specific VCPP licensing and support models, and ensuring that any proposed solution aligns with the defined SLAs. By conducting a detailed performance baseline and compatibility analysis, the specialist ensures that the customer's expectations are managed realistically and that the provider can deliver the agreed-upon service levels without compromising the integrity of their cloud infrastructure. This proactive approach minimizes risk and builds trust, aligning with the ethical obligation to provide competent and reliable services. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the customer's stated requirements without validating them against the provider's capabilities would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the provider's operational realities and contractual limitations, potentially leading to overpromising and underdelivering. Such an approach could violate the terms of the VCPP agreement, leading to financial penalties or termination of the partnership. Furthermore, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence, which is a fundamental ethical requirement for any service provider. Another incorrect approach that relies on generic cloud migration best practices without considering the specific VMware Cloud Provider Program, VCPP, framework would also be a regulatory and ethical failure. VCPP has specific guidelines regarding licensing, support, and service delivery that must be followed. Deviating from these specific program requirements, even if following general industry best practices, can lead to non-compliance with the program's terms, impacting the provider's ability to offer VMware-based services and potentially incurring penalties from VMware. This highlights the importance of adhering to the specific jurisdictional framework relevant to the exam. A third incorrect approach that involves immediately committing to a solution based on past experience with similar migrations, without a fresh assessment of the current customer's environment and the provider's current offerings, is also professionally unsound. Past success does not guarantee future success, especially in dynamic cloud environments. This approach risks overlooking critical changes in the customer's infrastructure, updates to VMware technologies, or modifications to the provider's service catalog. It represents a failure in professional diligence and a potential breach of the duty of care owed to the customer and the provider. The professional reasoning process should involve a structured approach. First, thoroughly understand the customer's stated needs and technical environment. Second, consult the relevant VMware Cloud Provider Program, VCPP documentation, licensing agreements, and the provider's own service catalog and SLAs. Third, conduct a detailed technical assessment, including performance baselining and compatibility checks, against the provider's infrastructure and VMware's recommended configurations. Fourth, develop a proposed solution that demonstrably meets both customer requirements and provider capabilities within the VCPP framework. Finally, communicate transparently with the customer about the proposed solution, any limitations, and the expected outcomes. Question 17. When evaluating the potential relocation of customer data to a new cloud region to reduce operational costs, what is the most critical factor to consider from a regulatory compliance perspective for a VMware Cloud Provider specialist operating under the VMware Cloud Provider Program's adherence to data protection principles? Option A. The availability of lower-cost infrastructure and services in the target region, which can directly translate to reduced operational expenses. Option B. The ease of integration with existing VMware vSphere environments and the technical feasibility of migrating the data without service disruption. Option C. The potential for increased market reach and customer acquisition in the new region, driven by the competitive pricing advantage. Option D. The adequacy of data protection laws and enforcement mechanisms in the target region, ensuring they provide a level of protection essentially equivalent to that required by applicable data protection regulations. The correct answer is D. The adequacy of data protection laws and enforcement mechanisms in the target region, ensuring they provide a level of protection essentially equivalent to that required by applicable data protection regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between a cloud provider's desire to offer competitive pricing and the regulatory imperative to ensure data privacy and security, particularly when dealing with sensitive customer data. The challenge lies in balancing cost-effectiveness with compliance, ensuring that any cost-saving measures do not inadvertently compromise the integrity or confidentiality of customer data, which is a core tenet of data protection regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-based assessment of the proposed data processing location. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that data is processed in a manner that is both compliant with relevant regulations and protective of customer rights. By conducting a Data Protection Impact Assessment (DPIA) and verifying the adequacy of data protection measures in the target jurisdiction, the provider demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible data stewardship. This proactive stance mitigates legal and reputational risks and builds trust with customers. An incorrect approach that involves immediately relocating data to a lower-cost jurisdiction without adequate assessment fails to uphold the regulatory framework. This would constitute a breach of data protection principles, potentially violating requirements for lawful data transfer and adequate safeguards. It demonstrates a disregard for customer privacy and a failure to conduct necessary due diligence, exposing the organization to significant fines and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the cost savings without considering the data's sensitivity or the regulatory implications of the new location, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of data governance responsibilities and the potential impact on data subjects. It prioritizes financial gain over legal and ethical obligations, leading to non-compliance and potential harm to individuals whose data is processed. A professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying the type of data being processed, understanding the regulatory requirements applicable to that data, evaluating the proposed processing location against those requirements, and implementing appropriate safeguards. When considering changes that impact data location or processing, a mandatory step should be to consult with legal and compliance teams to ensure all regulatory obligations are met. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and ethically sound, protecting both the organization and its customers. Question 18. The risk matrix shows a critical security incident impacting a core customer-facing service. The immediate business pressure is to restore service as quickly as possible. Which of the following actions best aligns with the principles of responsible incident response and regulatory compliance for a VMware cloud provider specialist? Option A. Immediately initiate a broad-spectrum remediation effort on all potentially affected systems to restore service, deferring a detailed impact assessment until after operations are normalized. Option B. Engage a third-party incident response team to take over all remediation and assessment activities without direct oversight from the internal specialist to expedite the process. Option C. Focus solely on restoring the primary customer-facing service functionality, assuming other systems are unaffected, and address any secondary issues as they arise post-restoration. Option D. Halt all remediation efforts until a comprehensive impact assessment is completed, documenting all affected systems, data, and potential regulatory implications before proceeding with a targeted recovery plan. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a broad-spectrum remediation effort on all potentially affected systems to restore service, deferring a detailed impact assessment until after operations are normalized. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a cloud provider specialist to balance the immediate need for service restoration with the long-term implications of security and compliance. The pressure to resume operations quickly can lead to shortcuts that violate established protocols and regulatory requirements. The specialist must demonstrate sound judgment by prioritizing a thorough impact assessment over a hasty, incomplete one. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the principles of responsible IT service management and regulatory compliance. Comprehensive impact assessment, as mandated by frameworks like those governing VMware cloud provider specialists, ensures that all potential consequences of a security incident are understood before remediation actions are taken. This includes evaluating the effect on data integrity, customer confidentiality, service availability, and adherence to contractual obligations and relevant regulations. By systematically identifying affected systems, data, and services, the specialist can develop a remediation plan that not only restores functionality, but also mitigates future risks and prevents recurrence, thereby upholding the trust of customers and regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that bypasses a thorough impact assessment and proceeds directly to remediation without understanding the full scope of the incident is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of due diligence and potentially violates regulatory requirements that mandate risk assessment and incident response planning. Specifically, it could lead to inadequate remediation. Without understanding the full impact, the remediation efforts might be insufficient, leaving vulnerabilities open or failing to address the root cause, thus increasing the likelihood of future incidents. Data breaches or corruption. Hasty actions could inadvertently compromise sensitive data or lead to data loss, violating data protection regulations and contractual agreements. Service disruption. Incomplete remediation could lead to further service outages, impacting customer operations and potentially incurring penalties. Noncompliance. Failure to conduct a proper impact assessment and incident response can be a direct violation of compliance mandates, leading to audits, fines, and reputational damage. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response framework. This framework typically includes identification, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. Crucially, a detailed impact assessment must be integrated into the identification and containment phases. Professionals should always ask, what is the full scope of this incident? What systems, data, and services are affected? What are the potential legal, regulatory, and business consequences? What are our contractual obligations to customers? By systematically answering these questions, professionals can make informed decisions that prioritize both immediate recovery and long-term security and compliance. Question 19. The control framework reveals a situation where a VMware cloud provider specialist is asked by a client to recommend a specific third-party backup solution for their VMware Cloud Foundation environment. The specialist has recently been approached by this backup vendor about a potential future consulting engagement that could offer significant personal financial benefits, though no formal agreement is in place. The client is unaware of this potential engagement. What is the most ethically sound course of action for the specialist? Option A. Recommend the backup solution that the specialist is most familiar with, assuming it is a reputable product, without mentioning the potential future engagement, as it is not a confirmed offer. Option B. Fully disclose the potential future consulting engagement to the client and proceed with an objective evaluation of all suitable backup solutions, recommending the one that best meets the client's technical and business requirements. Option C. Recommend the backup solution from the vendor with whom the potential future engagement exists, highlighting its strengths while subtly downplaying the strengths of competing solutions. Option D. Decline to provide a recommendation for any backup solution to avoid any appearance of impropriety, leaving the client to find a solution independently. The correct answer is B. Fully disclose the potential future consulting engagement to the client and proceed with an objective evaluation of all suitable backup solutions, recommending the one that best meets the client's technical and business requirements. Explanation. The control framework reveals a potential conflict of interest when a VMware cloud provider specialist is asked to recommend a specific third-party backup solution for a client's VMware Cloud Foundation deployment. The challenge lies in ensuring the recommendation is based solely on the client's technical requirements and business needs, rather than any undisclosed personal or professional benefit. This scenario demands a high degree of integrity and adherence to professional ethics, particularly concerning transparency and unbiased advice. The correct approach is to disclose any potential conflicts of interest, no matter how minor they may seem, and to base the recommendation strictly on a thorough evaluation of the client's needs against available solutions. This aligns with the principles of professional conduct expected of a VMware cloud provider specialist, emphasizing client trust and the delivery of objective, technically sound advice. Transparency about any potential benefits, even if they are not directly financial, is crucial. The specialist should document the evaluation process, clearly outlining the criteria used and how each solution was assessed against those criteria. An incorrect approach would be to recommend a solution without disclosing a potential benefit, such as a referral fee or a future employment opportunity with the backup vendor. This constitutes a breach of trust and professional ethics, as it compromises the specialist's objectivity. Another incorrect approach is to steer the client towards a solution based on personal familiarity or ease of implementation, rather than a comprehensive assessment of the client's specific requirements for performance, scalability, security, and cost-effectiveness. This failure to conduct due diligence and prioritize the client's best interests is a significant ethical lapse. Furthermore, accepting incentives from a vendor to promote their product without full disclosure to the client is a direct violation of ethical guidelines and could have legal ramifications. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client welfare and ethical conduct. This involves proactively identifying potential conflicts of interest, seeking clarification from their organization or professional bodies if unsure, and always maintaining a commitment to providing unbiased, evidence-based recommendations. The process should involve clearly defining client requirements, objectively evaluating all viable solutions against these requirements, documenting the decision-making process, and transparently communicating any potential conflicts to the client. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a new multi-tenant VMware cloud service offering is nearing its go-live date, but a critical security vulnerability was discovered during late-stage testing. The development team proposes a rapid patch deployment without a full revalidation of the service's compliance posture against relevant industry standards and customer contractual obligations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for a VMware cloud provider specialist operating within a regulated environment? Option A. Proceed with the rapid patch deployment, prioritizing service availability, and conduct a full compliance revalidation post-launch. Option B. Deploy the patch to a limited set of non-production tenants to gauge its impact before a full rollout, deferring the full compliance revalidation until after the service is generally available. Option C. Halt the service launch, conduct a comprehensive security and compliance revalidation of the patch service, and only proceed once all risks are mitigated and compliance is confirmed. Option D. Implement the patch and rely on existing, general security controls to mitigate any residual compliance risks, assuming the patch itself addresses the primary vulnerability. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the rapid patch deployment, prioritizing service availability, and conduct a full compliance revalidation post-launch. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for VMware cloud providers, balancing the need for rapid innovation and service deployment with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The core of the challenge lies in the inherent tension between agility and control within a regulated cloud environment. Professionals must navigate this by ensuring that new service offerings do not inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or violate the strict requirements of the 5v0-32. 21 VMware Cloud Provider Specialist domain, which implies adherence to specific, albeit unstated for this exercise, regulatory frameworks governing cloud services. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive, integrated security and compliance strategy. By embedding security and compliance checks into the service development lifecycle, DevSecOps principles, the provider ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated before a service is exposed to customers. This aligns with best practices for regulated industries where security by design and compliance by design philosophy is paramount. This approach demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and risk management, which are fundamental ethical and professional obligations for cloud service providers. It ensures that the provider can confidently attest to the security and compliance posture of its offerings, thereby building trust with customers and regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of deployment over thorough risk assessment and validation. This could manifest as launching new services without adequate security testing, compliance reviews, or understanding of the specific regulatory implications for the target customer base. Such an approach creates significant regulatory and ethical failures. It exposes the provider to potential breaches, data loss, and non-compliance penalties, which can have severe financial and reputational consequences. Ethically, it represents a failure to protect customer data and to operate with the integrity expected of a professional cloud service provider. Another incorrect approach might involve relying solely on generic security measures without tailoring them to the specific risks associated with the new service or the regulatory landscape. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the nuanced requirements and a failure to perform a targeted risk assessment, leading to potential gaps in protection and compliance. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory environment, a thorough risk assessment for each new service, and the integration of security and compliance controls throughout the service lifecycle. This involves continuous monitoring, regular audits, and a commitment to staying abreast of evolving threats and regulatory changes. The process should involve cross-functional collaboration between development, operations, security, and compliance teams to ensure all aspects are adequately addressed.